Hey, what's going on guys? This is Shred and welcome to my practical guide to Ashrah. This video is designed to help you quickly understand Ashrah's moves, her basic strategy, her best Kameo pairs, and notable combo setups and strings so that you can hit the ground running and confidently take her online. So grab your Chris sword, hit that like and subscribe button. Now let's get after it. Now when learning a new character, I always like to build them from the ground up. So let's start with Ashrah's pros and cons. Her pros is she's very easy to use. Her combo execution is very easy. She does not need a high hit count to deal high damage. In fact, some of her highest damage combos are only 9 to 10 hits, and she has a very straightforward game plan. Her range is really good. She thrives in the mid range, which means she relies on her neutral game in order to get in, which means she has a lot of very good pokes and combo starters from a pretty decent range. And because of that, her mobility is really good. She can also go through projectiles, which we'll get into in a little bit. Her mix-up game is really good, particularly her standing 2-2 and her forward 4-2. She has a pretty decent anti-zoning tool, her back forward 2. It can be unsafe, but it is still a pretty good tool if you know how to use it correctly. And last, almost everything she has is safe on block, so you can't be afraid to throw out some pokes or combo starters without having to face the repercussions of getting punished. And her cons, which are kind of not a lot, are not deal breakers, but they are something to keep note of, and that is she's not very good at zoning. Yeah, she does have a projectile in both of her stances, and her dark stance projectile is okay if you are at a distance and you're just trying to put on dark stacks on your opponent. However, I would not use these as zoning tools because their startup time is so long. And her pressure game isn't very good in comparison to, say, Lee May or Johnny Cage, but she still can give okay pressure, but you do have to keep your distance. And last is she's very reliant on her cameos to help her do both of these. Now let's talk about the best cameos to pair with Ashrah. You'll notice the first three all have standing stuns. Now I would consider Serena's boomerang as a standing stun because Ashrah doesn't really have a lot of tools to extend combos, which we'll get into in a little bit. But I'm going to start with Serena, and I'm not just saying this because Serena is a really good cameo for almost everybody, but Serena really is a really good cameo for Ashrah. Her high damage output allows her not to rely on her dark stance. She has a really fast projectile that's good for zoning, and her boomerang is a really good combo extender for Ashrah, considering she doesn't have a lot of tools for combo extenders. And Frost is another really good cameo to pair with Ashrah. Her low ice is a really good freeze for not only a combo starter or extender, but is a good tool to use if you want to switch from light to dark stance or vice versa. And her slow moving ice ball is really good for pressure and anti-airs. Sub-Zero is also a really good pair for Ashrah. He has an anti-zoning ice shield which you can use, and also his freeze ability is a really good combo extender. Of course, you can switch from different stances with it. And last is Sector for his pressure. His rocket and his flamethrower are really good, but because Ashrah does not rely on her cameos for high damage, Sector is a really good cameo to put on that pressure. Now let's go over the basic strategy with Ashrah. Like I said before, Ashrah is really good in the neutral. So here is where you're going to be. This is your area of expertise right in here. Because if you notice, her poke is really far away. So you can play around in this area and just poke away at your opponent. So you're going to be using your forward 2 poke a lot. And also at this range, it gives you perfect amount of space to whiff punish, whether they are throwing out combos at you or they're trying to jump at you. It gives you enough space and time to follow up with a whiff punish. And one more thing about the forward 2 poke is that you can follow up with a projectile. It is completely safe, and whether they're blocking or not is a great way to put distance between you and your opponent if you're trying to like make that space. Maybe you're too close with your poke and you need to push them back a little bit, or you're just trying to follow up with a little, something extra. That is a great way to do that. Or if you're just trying to play stacks in a safe manner on the dark side, that is also a great way to do so. The other thing is about her combo starters is they have pretty good range. You don't have to be super up close like, say, Melina. You can be right here and start her standing 2-2, or right here and start her forward 4-2. Now, the majority of the time you're going to be spending on your light stance. Now, when you switch to your dark stance, you're going to be using this to basically place stacks to switch back to your light stance to pretty much unload on heavy damage on your opponent. Now, however, I would not rely on this. Most of the time you are going to be spent in the light stance, which if you use cameos such as Serena, Sub-Zero, or Frost, then that's not going to be a problem for you. But if you use Sector for your cameo, you are definitely going to want to be in the dark stance. So whether you're laying on your stacks, this way, which like I said, I wouldn't use this as a complete zoning tool because they can easily be jumped, low blocked, and the startup time is really fast. Same thing with that. You're pretty much going to want to do your best to lay on 3 stacks, and when you knock them down, try to switch back over to your light stance. Now, like I said, I would not rely heavily on the dark to light stances and switching back and forth. It is something that you definitely want to use, but the majority of your time is going to be spent in the light stance, which she does deal a whole lot of damage. Now, the main pokes you are going to be using is, of course, your forward 4-2, which I just mentioned, but 2 pokes that you can use for mix-ups, but they are knockdowns, is your back 3-1, which is a low to a mid, and your back 2-2, which is a mid to an overhead, which I also recommend using these in the corner when you're trying to mix up your opponent and kind of like play mind games with them and frustrate them. Your main anti-airs, of course, going to be your down 2. Also, your back 2-2 is a good anti-air. And one of my favorite anti-airs is her down forward 2. If you EX it, can follow up with an aerial combo. And just plain old school footsies. I mean, the best thing that you can do with Ashrah, honestly, is just play the neutral game, especially when you have people who are jump in heavy. Now, the game is really anti-air. It does not want you to jump, and it has your up block as a means of an anti-air, but you'll see a lot of people are just empty jumping as a means to fake out, which is a really good tactic I would use as well. But one thing I would not recommend doing is your jump cancel. If you down to somebody and you press up block as a means to jump cancel in for some kind of aerial combo, it is 2 meters, which I think is a complete waste of meter. I would not use that, considering I would probably use my meter for something else. And then going into her specials is her down forward 1. Your down forward 1, like I said, I'd use this to place stacks, but I would not rely on it for zoning. And then there's your back forward 2, and if you EX it, it actually has armor. It is arguably what I would consider one of the best wake ups in the game, because if you do back forward 2 and you hold down along with the armor is a really good side switch. So if you have one of those pressure heavy opponents, is definitely something I would use for a side switch so that you can be in the corner. And then there's your down back 2, which is going to be a great combo ender, but if you are going to be in your dark stance, is one of the best ways to lay on your dark stacks on your opponent. And then there's your down forward 3, which is your main combo extender that's going to go into the air if you EX it. Now let's get into your combo starters. You of course have your standing 1-2, your standing 2-2, which I would probably use the most because it is a great mix up. It goes from a high to a low, and it has pretty good distance on it, so I'd highly recommend using that a lot. And then there's your forward 4-2, which also covers a lot of distance. It's a mid to an overhead, and it's her only mid that she can actually use to cancel into a special. Another combo starter I actually really like to use is the forward 2 poke. However, it is reliant on your cameo, and of the cameos that I have mentioned, the only 2 that you can really use this on is Serena and Frost, because they're the only 2 that actually have an ability that will hit from that far away. And then last, and which is probably the most important combo starter or combo extender, which is her standing 2-1, which leads to a feint. All right, now let's get into the meat and potatoes of it all, and that is Ashrah's combo structure. Now, given the combo starters that I just laid out and the basic strategy that I talked about earlier, let's put that all together to develop how you are going to structure her combos to get the most damage. So everything is going to lead into your standing 2-1. This feint opens up so many possibilities for Ashrah. Ideally, you would like to use this as a combo starter, because using only 1 bar and no cameos, you can get almost 40% damage out of it. However, realistically, you are going to want to use Ashrah's mix-ups to open up your opponent, which does rely on a cameo with a standing stun. Now, after you have hit your opponent with your 2-1, you have a lot of options. You can use your down forward 1 to a forward 2 to an EX down forward 2 in an aerial combo. Or if you're having trouble with that forward 4-3 timing, you can micro dash to a standing 1-2, which is a bit easier. You can use your forward 3 overhead side switch to an EX down forward 2 into aerial combo. Or if you want to place dark stacks on your opponent, you could forward 4-3 into a down back 2. By the way, if you are quick enough, you can switch stances to get a combo out of it. Now, if you have someone in the corner, I would also use this same combo structure, but to avoid side switching and putting yourself in the corner, you could end with a down back 2, or you can down forward 2 into an aerial combo. But do not end with a back forward 2, as that will side switch you. Now, one thing I didn't mention earlier was your forward 3, which is your overhead side switch combo starter. Although it is a good tool to catch your opponent off guard, especially if they crouch block the entire time, I wouldn't abuse this, because it is something you can follow up with an EX down forward 2 and combo off of it. But if your opponent knows this combo, they know that they can easily down 2 after they block your down forward 2. Now, this structure is all being used in your light stance, but what if you are in your dark stance? Well, you can also use the same structure, just don't use your down forward 1 after you land your standing 2-1. It will have less damage, but remember, your dark stance is basically used to put dark stacks on your opponent. Another key thing to remember is if you do finish a combo with a back forward 2, hold down so you can at least do some damage with it. The properties change for this special when you are in dark stance to not have an attack unless you hold down. And the last thing is, when you do put dark stacks on your opponent and you switch back to light, you do have different options. First thing is, you can go about your same combos and just use your stacks as damage buff. But something I didn't mention earlier was that 3 of your combo strings while in light stance can now be canceled for a full combo. Or if you have a Kameo with an ambush attack, you can use them to extend the combo as well. All right, guys, I'm gonna close out with a series of combo examples. I really hope you like my practical guide to Ashrah and that it helps you to further your success with her. If you have something to add, I encourage you to comment down below. I'd love to hear the different combos or cameos you like to use with her, because I too want to learn as much about the character as I possibly can. Also, comment what other characters you would like to see me do a guide on. My next one is probably going to be Natara, which I'm really looking forward to putting together. So thank you again for watching, and until next time, this is Shred out.